All right, it is, oh, that seems awfully loud. Is it, sorry. Do you want me to talk for volume? That sounds better. Okay, thank you. It is 6:30 p.m. and I will call the regularly scheduled City Council meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Heller?
Here.
Councillor Eber?
Here.
Councillor Holen?
Here.
Councillor McGuire?
Here.
Councillor Robinson?
Here.
Councillor Fisher?
If you're able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just wanted to note there's been an addition to the agenda. We had moved the audience participation period to after the presentation of the traffic signal warrant study, expecting that that's the reason most people are here. But if there is anyone who wanted to speak and address the council about something else, this would be your opportunity now. There's no one on this list right now, but again, if you're here and would like to address the council about anything other than the traffic signal warrant study, okay, seeing none, then we will move on to the presentation of the traffic signal warrant study for the intersection of South Franklin Street and East Bellevue Avenue, conducted by WSB Design and Consulting, LLC. And I'm going to start out with just a little bit of an introduction. I wanted to start by acknowledging that this process began as a result of very tragic accidents at the intersection of Bellevue and Franklin. And our hearts go out to the families and friends of those lost their lives and to the entire community sharing in this grief. I know that everyone here tonight, everyone in the audience, everyone up here on the dais, all of our staff, is united by a deep commitment to the safety of our community, and that's why we're all here. Following these accidents, we started hearing from members of the community and the community at large, not just residents of Cherry Hills Village. And we heard a very specific request, a request to install a traffic signal at Bellevue and Franklin. We received input from a little over 50 Cherry Hills Village residents, about evenly split in favor of or opposed to a traffic signal. Then there were petitions circulated on both sides of the issue with many more signatories, around 400 in favor of a traffic signal, of which about 90 people were Cherry Hills Village residents, and approximately 500 people signed a petition in opposition to a light, of which about 150 people were Cherry Hills Village residents. While this feedback represents a small percentage of the more than 5,000 residents in Cherry Hills, it is not a formal referendum. We have heard from enough people to know that this request warranted thorough consideration and deserved a response. We take our commitment to our community and our residents very seriously, and we acted. Traffic control devices like signals and stop signs aren't installed on intuition. They are standardized across the country, and as such, there are national engineering standards for how, when, and where they are used. And that's defined in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, otherwise known as the MUTCD. In my 14 years serving on council, I've learned that traffic discussions are often emotionally charged. That is exactly why we look to the MUTCD for objective, data-driven guidance. According to the MUTCD, in order to install a signal, specific engineering criteria called warrants must be met. In 2024, Greenwood Village conducted a warrant study indicating that one such condition was met. Based on that data, CDOT approved the study, which allowed both cities to move forward with a signal. However, it is important to note that CDOT did not choose to install a signal on the state highway themselves. Because the MUTCD relies strictly on objective data, we became concerned when residents shared during public comment that drivers were explicitly told to navigate the intersection on data collection days to artificially inflate traffic counts. Furthermore, we received an independent third-party review of the same data that contradicted the 2024 study's conclusions. And finally, a historical warrant study for the same intersection from 2008 showed warrants were not met, and the recent data indicates that traffic volumes on Bellevue have actually declined slightly since 2008. Because this decision will heavily impact our community, City Council felt we couldn't rely on clouded or conflicting data. We needed a fresh, independent look. To ensure the complete integrity in our process, City Council commissioned a new warrant study. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Jay Goldie, Director of Public Works, to present the results of that study.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and members of council. Tonight, staff will be presenting the results of the traffic signal warrant that was completed by WSB for the city. First, I want to acknowledge that there has been tragic loss of life in this intersection, and the health, safety, and welfare of all community members is at the core of our mission as an organization. The review of the signal warrants is based solely on data and established standards to warrant the installation of a traffic signal. This process takes all emotions and feelings surrounding this matter out. This is in no way meant to diminish or discredit the fact that two individuals have perished. The signal warrant process is designed in a manner to determine if, in fact, a signal is the best and safest manner in which to address movements at a specific intersection. A signal warrant is a specific process, does not look at or consider other possible alternatives. That is a completely separate process altogether. So staff will not be making recommendations on alternatives as this process has not looked at what alternatives may be appropriate. As far back as 2008, the city has taken the concerns voiced about this intersection seriously. In 2008, concerns were raised about the intersection, and the city had a signal warrant completed at that time, and the warrant determined that a signal was not appropriate. Of note and surprising, and the mayor mentioned this, the traffic volumes have not changed drastically in those 18 years. They are very close. They're within 50 vehicles over a 12-hour period. So it was very surprising to see that those numbers are still so close. Has no bearing on this warrant study. I just thought it was an interesting fact. In 2024, the city of Greenwood Village completed a signal warrant. This did show, based on the traffic volumes on Franklin, a signal was warranted. City Council heard from residents both for and against the installation of a traffic light and directed staff to hire a traffic consultant to conduct a separate and independent warrant study to better inform council on this matter. Again, this presentation tonight is only on the results of the signal warrant. The past studies have no bearing on the results being presented to City Council, and no alternative analysis has been performed. I want to emphasize as we go through the results of the warrant, because I believe it's an important point, a determination that a signal is not warranted under the MUTCD criteria does not mean there are no concerns at the intersection. Rather, it indicates that the current traffic, pedestrian, and crash conditions do not meet nationally established thresholds for a signal warrant. And with that, I'd like to introduce Saeed Sobai and Hamida. I already apologize for butchering her name before I got to it. Atamadnia. Was that? Atamadnia. I've known her for months now and still don't get that right. They were with WSB that conducted the City the study for the city, and I may turn it over to them at times, as most of this is very technical, and they are the experts, and they will be able to explain some of the nuances and some of the technical issues. So first I wanted to take a look at traffic signal warrant and what it is. The mayor talked a little bit about the manual on uniform traffic control devices. And again, it ensures that no matter where you drive, traffic signs and signals and pavement markings all look the same. All 50 states have adopted the MUTCD. It's adopted by the Federal Highway Department, and it is the standard on which most, if not all, agencies are depending on for such things as signals, signs, pavement markings. Specifically within the MUTCD, Chapter 4C contains and outlines the requirements that we'll be looking at tonight. The MUTCD outlines 9 potential warrants when considering the installation of a traffic signal. Not all warrants are applicable to every situation. Each situation is treated distinctly based on numerous factors that may differ from intersection to intersection. I will go over which of the 9 warrants are relative to this intersection at Bellevue and Franklin. A few notes of interest, though, that I wanted to point out is that, and I'll explain this a little later, the MUTCD allows an adjustment of traffic volume warrants depending on the 85th percentile speed, or in some cases, population. Second, based on CDOT guidelines, warrant 3 and 8 cannot be used independently and must be used with other warrants within the signal warrant process. Before we get into the 9 warrants, I wanted to go over some facts about the MUTCD and the outlines for acceptable conditions for signal warrant data collection. Data must be collected on typical normal days, meaning that no holidays, special events, or other unusual traffic spikes or lulls can be happening at that time. Collection is usually done between Tuesdays and Thursdays. All 4 days of data collection in this case were on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Good weather is needed, clear, dry conditions. Data was collected during optimal weather. There were no temporary disruptions such as road construction or utility work in the vicinity. There were no disruptions of this type in the area during data collection. School must be in session as traffic can be affected dramatically in some situations. Staff verified that all local public and private schools were in session during the data collection days, and they were on their normal schedules, no special schedules, late starts, those type of things. No incidents or abnormal delays. Staff worked with both the Cherry Hills Village Police Department and the Greenwood Village Police Department to ensure that they did not conduct enforcement operations during the data collection period. This was very important as both departments have been and continue to do more enforcement operations in the area. There were no reported crashes or roadblocks during the data collection time. All traffic signals in the immediate area were operating normally. The data that was collected during these 4 days did show that the 85th percentile speed limit was above 40 miles per hour. Based on this information, the warrant was conducted using the 70% reduction factor. Why a 70% reduction? When approach speeds, and in this case the approach speeds are on Bellevue, are high, 40 miles per hour or greater, the MUTCD allows for a reduction in the required traffic volumes to 70% of the normal warrant threshold. If cars are going fast, less traffic volume is required to justify a signal. This is also allowed in rural areas and communities smaller than population under 10,000. Although we're under 10,000, that part doesn't apply to us because we are part of an urbanized area and not a isolated rural area. Again, data was collected for 4 days to verify the data was consistent and that no anomalies in speed or volume might affect the results. And if you look at the graph there, the data collection was so consistent. The 4 days are virtually the same line on that graph for when we're seeing spikes in AM and PM. Because the data was so consistent, we can have a high degree of certainty that the data collected is accurate and reflective of normal patterns at the Franklin and Bellevue intersection. And the data that's collected is speed, volume, turning movements, and pedestrian and bicycle volumes. The turning movements, just instead of just who was on Bellevue, who was on Franklin, it tracks who's turning at each of those intersections. And so we have all of that data that goes into this. All right, as I briefly touched on earlier, there are 9 possible warrants that can be considered when conducting a traffic signal warrant. First, I'll explain the warrants that are not applicable in this case on Bellevue and Franklin. Warrant 3, this is a peak hour warrant. This is used in special situations for extra concentrated time periods, usually 1 hour. It usually is for factory areas with shift work, industrial parks, where traffic is condensed and everyone's trying to come in or leave at the same time. It's not spread out more than an hour, and so that doesn't apply here. We don't have that situation. Warrant 5 is only used when it's adjacent to school. So that's a school zone warrant, takes into special consideration. There are no schools close enough in this case to utilize that warrant. Warrant 6 is utilized when traffic is being studied at a corridor level. So Warrant 6 would look at all of Bellevue in a certain area, not just a single intersection. Therefore, it's not appropriate to use in this case. Warrant 8 is similar to 6, but at a network level. So instead of just looking at a single corridor, it would look at corridors that cross. This is used to help create logical routes and prevent overloading of a single road. It makes alternative routes more attractive and usable and balanced. So that's a bigger picture. Each of those warrants have a specific use. Those are not used at the single intersection level. And Warrant 9 is a very specialized warrant. It's used near rail crossings or light rail crossings. So traffic doesn't back up over railroad tracks, those type of things. So now I'll go into detail of the 4 warrants that are relevant to the Franklin and Bellevue intersection. Warrant 1. So first, to clarify, when you're looking at these and in your packet, you may have noticed it says major and minor streets. In this case, the major street is Bellevue, the minor street is Franklin. I think that was pretty apparent, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Okay, condition A of warrant 1 focuses on the major road as the main factor in the equation, i.e., the main road pressure is too busy, the threshold for the major street is higher in volume. Condition B is the opposite. It focuses on the minor road as the main factor in the equation. Side street demand is high and multiple cars are waiting on a regular basis. The threshold numbers are lowered because of the delay on the minor road. The required volume for the 8-hour warrant is 53 or greater for 53 vehicles on the minor road or greater during any 8-hour consecutive period. not consecutive, I apologize, any 8-hour period during the day. So those don't have to be consecutive. If at any time there's 8 hours and the minor road sees 53 or greater, when you're using that condition, that's the requirement. So then you can combine A and B and use both of those if traffic is high on both the smaller road and the large road. And again, that changes the conditions and the requirements. And these are all ors, so you don't have to have, all of these do not have to meet. Either condition A has to meet, condition B has to meet, or condition A and B has to meet as a combined. Those totals change, and as you see on the thresholds change with each of those conditions based on what they're looking at. And you'll see that all three of those conditions are not satisfied, and this warrant is not met. And so this is all of the data for the highest 8 hours in a day, or the average of the 4 days. And in this case, only one of all of the possible needed conditions are met. So the warrant is not met, just 1 hour of 8 needed. Warrant 2 is the 4-hour warrant. It's an easier warrant to meet the threshold. It's only required to be met for a 4-hour period during the day, and it does not need to be consecutive. Again, it can be any 4 hours during the day. For this warrant, with the 70% volume reduction, given for the 85th percentile speed being over 40, the minimum must be 60 vehicles per hour for a 4-hour period. Again, using the minor road, 60. And again, this is the data for 4 hours. The vehicle volume for the major road Bellevue is combined in both directions. So that's the total major volume. And in this case, that is not a factor because it's well over the required threshold for those volumes. Sorry. And again, sorry. If we look at this, the 4 hours, there's only a single hour. The next closest, there's a few at 45, which are 16 less per hour vehicles needed, and then it goes down. And then warrant 4, this is a very straightforward warrant. The required pedestrian volume is again reduced to the 70% requirement based on the 85th percentile speed being over 40 miles per hour. In this warrant, either a 4-hour period of at least 37 people must be utilizing this intersection, or 46 people need to be using it in a single hour period. And in both cases, you can see that the volume is very low at this intersection and does not meet the threshold in either case, and the warrant is not met. Warrant 7 evaluates the crash history at the intersection. There are 3 items in this warrant that all must be met to satisfy the requirement of the crash experience and used in conjunction with other alternatives, traffic volume, and pedestrian numbers. Item A is a prerequisite that requires that before crash experience can be used, alternative improvements have been tried at the intersection and have failed to reduce the crashes. We did not do that as a city because it was important for us to have our own signal warrant completed. And thus we did not perform this as we needed to get the data before school was out. And we wanted to have our data for council to use. Therefore, it doesn't matter about B and C, even though neither of those are met, and we'll talk about them. But all three of these have to be met to be able to utilize this warrant. And to my knowledge, CDOT and Greenwood Village have not attempted any of these either. And I just explained that the city has not attempted any alternatives. Item B is the crash history. So a qualified traffic engineer determines which crashes would be correctable by the installation of a light and compares the numbers to the table provided by the MUTCD. These are industry set standards that outline which crashes would be fixable by a light. And there's a well-established industry standard on how those crashes are looked at and if they are counted towards, are these correctable by a light? So the crash data is collected and charted to look for patterns of certain types of crashes, like again, the right-angled or turning crashes, as those crashes could likely be prevented by a traffic signal. The intersection may qualify for a signal under Warrant 7, depending on other factors. Crashes are compared to the 1-year and 3-year thresholds determined to determine if this portion of the warrant is met. Remember, all three items, A, B, and C, must be met. The raw crash numbers are only a small part of the equation. The third item, C, considers traffic volumes that have been established under other warrants in this process. But it's not as simple as just traffic volumes, so we'll go to the next slide. It's a little easier to understand. So again, when you look at the chart, items A and B and C must be met. Item A, again, further study is required. There needs to be an alternatives analysis, and other alternatives need to be tried prior to Warrant 7 being used for a traffic signal installation. Item B, we look at the periods 1 or 3 years, the total angle pedestrian crashes, all severities, not satisfied, only 3 out of the 10 required under the 1 year and 6 out of the 16 required for the 3 year in that item, or the total fatal and injury angle and pedestrian crashes, again, 3 and 6, 4 and 9. So that item B is not satisfied in this case. Then item C, as we talked about, it looks at the 8-hour volume and not the 4-hour volume, only the 8 hours is looked at in item C. And again, it's reduced even farther because if you've met items A and B, safety is a major, major issue. And so C, again, lowers the required volume to look at this and satisfy this, but in this case, it is not satisfied. So with all 3 items not being satisfied, the warrant is not met. All right, based on the evaluation of the traffic volumes, pedestrian activity, and crash history, none of the applicable signal warrants have been satisfied at this location. And thus, the intersection does not currently meet the criteria for signal installation. And again, I think it's important, I mentioned it at first in my presentation, that just because a signal is not warranted under this does not mean there's no concerns at this intersection. It simply indicates that the warrants are not met to install a light at this intersection. Staff is available for questions, and again, our representatives from WSB are here to answer any technical questions council may have.
All right, we'll open it up to questions. Does anyone, yes, Councilor Holland.
And it was a good presentation. I understood it completely with regard to the warrants, which are, again, warrants associated with putting in a traffic light at that intersection. And as you said, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other issues. And in particular, the thing that I was curious about is, but there is clearly, though, I think, a speed issue on Bellevue. Is that not correct? Is that not what the study showed?
Yes, the study showed that the 85th percentile is at above 40, with the speed limit being 35.
And so, and while that's not relevant to the traffic light, what it does say for consideration after considering this issue is that that's something that probably needs to be looked into from an overall safety perspective on that road.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Any other questions about the study or? Okay, now what we would like to do is we're going to have audience participation to give the public an opportunity to express their comments. There's a sign-up sheet in the back of the room. If you did not have an opportunity to sign up yet and would like to speak, please do so. Otherwise, I will call people in the order that you've signed up. There's a time limit, as usual, of 5 minutes per speaker. Your time may not be ceded to other speakers. Please don't interfere with the orderly function of the meeting, and that means no applause, no signs of disapproval. We're just going to allow people to speak and express themselves in their own way. Direct all comments to City Council, not to other members of the audience or other speakers. As a reminder, per our policy, we don't respond to public comment. It's an opportunity for you to express your comments, but it's not a dialogue. We will have discussion after this that you're all welcome to stay and listen and be and hear the discussion. There is no AV.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a question that I was.
Oh, I'm sorry, about the study. Let me
About
finish
the
this real
study,
quickly, and then we'll go
can I-
back to
yeah.
questions. There's no audio visual available for speakers. And we're going to ask that the topic be limited to this topic since we had opportunity for public input, previously. Yes, Councilor
I
Robinson.
just wanted to ask the representatives here how many traffic studies you have done of this type. I think it's important for me to understand your credibility and how many times you've performed this sort of analysis.
So if you'd love to come to the podium, please, and just state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Said Sobi. I'm a Director of Traffic Engineering for WSP. I had 25 years of experience with CDOT, much of it in traffic sections, different regions of CDOT. Oversaw numerous, I can't tell you a number because it's been a long time, but oversaw many of those similar situations. And during my time at WSP, we have also done a number of signal warrants.
Was there anything unusual or out of the ordinary about this study that would cause it to be different from others that you've performed?
No, I wouldn't say that's out of the ordinary. I mean, I have done this long enough that at least to me, it was, making sure that we consider all of the factors that needs to be considered in the warrant, but I can't think of something that I would say was out of the ordinary.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move back to audience participation. The first, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. When you come up, please state your name and address for the record. The first person is Meg Dotweiler, and after Meg is going to be Lauren Jeffra.
Very tall. Okay, hi. Hi, Meg Dotweiler. I currently reside in the Cherry Ridge neighborhood, but I have a unique, perspective. I grew up off of Bellevue Place, and my parents lived there just until about 2 years ago. I learned to drive in a Jeep Grand Wagoneer, turning left off of Summit Boulevard onto Bellevue to go to school, like to Cherry Creek High School. And it was very scary, actually, as a teenager to learn how to drive and turn left, whether it was Summit or Franklin. I was lucky enough to be able to squeeze the Grand Wagoneer in that little tiny suicide lane, and I can only imagine the number of people driving on Bellevue that thought I was going to plow into them as I, very quickly came out of Summit. And I guess my question is, I understand the warrants and sort of the criteria being met or not, but I guess I would wonder what a light signal would do for the traffic flow or the ability to even turn left off of Summit. I think, citizens of Cherry Hills Village are turning left more than, say, citizens of probably Greenwood Village, right? You also have, so I think the nature of where traffic goes, right, Bellevue to into the tech center, I-25 versus turning right to Broadway, the greater sort of traffic flow and where the need for a light is. I would say I would advocate for a light. I mean, my husband as a driver disagrees. He thinks it would be annoying. But I just think that, just because standards aren't met doesn't mean that it's not necessarily prudent to put something there, especially long-term. I'm shocked to hear that volume has not increased since 2008. That is extremely surprising to me, just based on the fact that I still live in the area and drive in the area, and it certainly does not seem like volume is the same as 2008. Additionally, I would say that I bring a different perspective because I am currently the risk manager for Douglas County. I've done that for 10 years, and I deal with a lot of litigation around things that occur in public entities. And I will say that I have seen recently a sort of deterioration of governmental immunity, right? So that doesn't really come into play in this situation. There's a lot of immunities that would apply to both Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills Village, and CDOT in these situations. But long-term, signals take a long time to engineer and design and build. And so it's not like this is gonna happen tomorrow. I think that, long-range planning could be beneficial. I would also say what was confusing, because I really didn't have this on my radar until I saw the news story this morning. And I drive down Bellevue every day and there's a light signal at the Glenmore. And to me, it just doesn't compute why that light signal was installed and not a light signal at Franklin and Bellevue. It seems like I don't know what the studies were or what the justification was, but it certainly seems like that light signal would not nearly meet the warrants that the one at Franklin and Bellevue would. But I will say, what I think there's a slight flaw in the count in that for pedestrians, growing up in the area, that particular area of Cherry Hills, I would have loved to more regularly access, let's say like going on a bike ride to the Highline Canal. That's the nearest kind of access to the Highline Canal if you were to go south on Franklin. But there's no crosswalk. There's no light. So people aren't inclined to actually try to cross that street because it's pretty dangerous. The speed is excessive. I mean, new cars, I even find myself speeding down that road and I know better. So I think that you can look at some of these warrants, particularly the pedestrian piece, and I would gather that if you put a signal there and you put crosswalks there, more people would use it. They would certainly utilize that. My husband crosses Bellevue now at the Glenmore way more than he ever would have. By the way, it's not long enough for pedestrians, just so you know. He's told me that. But I think that there's a matter of like meeting the basics. Oh, my time's done. Meeting the basics, but also like, this is Cherry Hills. Like, when have we ever done anything basic? Like, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world to do more than what's asked. So,
Thank you.
my 2 cents.
Next is Lauren Jeffra, and after Ms. Jeffra is Howard Scher.
Hello, council and staff. My name is Lauren Jeffra. I live at 5060 South Franklin Street, just 2 off of the intersection of that we're discussing. And I have 2 young children who bike and play and cross the street every single day to be with their friends. I just want to thank the council for conducting this study. I just want to say that everyone here wants drivers to be safe. Everyone here wants our children and families to be safe, and everyone here mourns when horrible accidents happen and people lose their lives. The Cherry Hills Village City Council is also clearly committed to safety. And as a resident of Cherry Hills, I am so grateful that this council funded and conducted an independent study about adding a light at Franklin. It shows how dedicated you are to keeping our neighborhood and our families safe. After reading the results of the study that were published last week, we can clearly see that adding a light is not needed to improve safety. This engineering study shows that a light is not warranted. So then what now? Knowing that the traffic signal is not warranted, there are other vetted options to keep drivers, pedestrians, residents, and most importantly, children safe. These other options include traffic calming islands, medians, or even a traffic light 0.2 miles away at Brookside Drive for our Greenwood Village neighbors. I am grateful to this council and my neighbors for their commitment to making decisions that are data-driven, data-based, financially responsible, and supported by actual residents of Cherry Hills Village. Installing a light is none of those things. I thank you again for your dedication and your time.
Thank you. Howard Scher, and then after Mr. Scher is Linda McNeve.
Good evening, and I'll try to keep to the guardrails, Mayor Brown. First of all, in my career, I am very evidence-based, and I am happy to see this study.
Sorry, Mr. Scher, could you state your name and address?
210
Sorry.
Suffolk Boulevard. Anything else?
No, that's
Okay, I made the cut. Evidence-based is important to make decisions, and I think we have a traffic study here. Although I think anyone can take a shot at it. I'm a little
Please address your comments to me, to the council.
sorry.
Thank you.
You're right, you did mention that, and I'm a little troubled by the dating. I remember going up there, actually seeing the monitors, and there was no traffic. It happened to be when the schools were out of session in Cherry Hills. I think St. Mary's was in session at the time. There's some issues about that. But let's get back to where I am. I think we have the cart before the horse. And by that I mean we're looking at a correction for a problem, and there are many potential corrections, but I understand where this came from. People screamed and yelled, and what they said was put a traffic signal there. And that's what we're dealing with today and now. When in fact, what I heard wasn't put up a traffic signal, because these are not traffic engineers. In fact, I don't think anyone who said anything about that was a traffic engineer, and I'm certainly not one. I never took it in graduate school, but I did study death and trauma, and I don't like it, not a bit. So the issue to me is this is a dangerous place to be, and I can see where the traffic will change behavior. I myself, as you know, is a cyclist. I do not drive my bike across Bellevue at any time, and I can tell you it'll be a fool's errand to try and walk across Bellevue at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So behavior can be changed, and this has done it. Anyhow, what I think I would like to support is that this is a dangerous place. I would include Summit in that, by the way. And when we moved here over 40 years ago, there was a discussion to close Summit off because they realized it was not safe. And it never happened, but it's like Yogi Berra said, this is deja vu all over again, except now it's worse. It's a lot worse. People are getting killed, and there are crashes, and the last part of the trifecta is that between University and Clarkson is a rat race. 35 miles an hour. I saw a car last week go 35, maybe 2. No one goes that speed. Now, I'm not necessarily only in favor of a traffic signal, but I am in favor, from what I hear people say, put up a traffic signal. What they really are saying, please do something. Please. And that is a cry that resonates with me because they do not have the lever of power. They can't do it. But when I talk to CDOT, when I talk to the Cherry Hills Police, when I talk to the Greenwood Village Police, when I talk to my neighbors, they all say, that's dangerous. Don't go there. And cut through traffic? Oh my goodness. How do you think I got here today? I went all the way down to Clarkson to come around. So there are issues that we can all talk about. I see my light is on, but the cart is before the horse here. Let's deal with the options and then talk about a light or what have you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Linda McNeve.
Good evening, council members and staff, everybody. I think
Sorry, can you state your name and
First of
address?
all, I live at.
Sorry, Linda, can you state your name and address?
Yeah, Linda McNeve. I live at 1100 East Stanford, so a few blocks from Franklin, and I have lived here for 37 years, I think, and driven Bellevue and Franklin and all the streets around here. All that time, raised a son here, saw him become a driver, and lots of other teenagers in the neighborhood. A lot of kids grew up here. They've moved back. Now their children are here. And so there's a lot of pedestrian activity on all the streets in Old Cherry Hills. Really kind of an amazing amount of people out for walks, walking dogs, walking multiple dogs, pushing a baby carriage and walking a dog, children on bikes. Now that school's out, it's much more evident how many children there are in this neighborhood. And a lot of other traffic, you know, we haven't heard, as far as I know, from people from Englewood, but there is a large pedestrian volume of people who walk from Englewood through Old Cherry Hills to get away from the traffic. If they want to go for a nice walk without traffic, they cross Clarkson and walk in our neighborhood. And we've always loved that because we think it makes the area safer when you have people walking and dogs being walked too. So I think it is a pedestrian area, and the last time I spoke to you about this, I described Franklin particularly during the school year, in the afternoons, Franklin is a pedestrian mall. The number of people walking, biking, with families, with children, with dogs, on Franklin Street in particular. The school buses come that way, and it really, if you look down the street, and I think we ought to have some video, I don't know if anybody has done that, of what it looks like around 3 in the afternoon. So it's very much a pedestrian way. But other things too, you know, I really think the message here is Cherry Hills needs to try other things to make Bellevue and the Bellevue-Franklin intersection safer. And the number one thing is slow down the traffic on Bellevue. for a multitude of reasons, not just because of this intersection. I drive it almost every day, and I'm the one who's going 35 miles an hour and making other people very irritated behind me. But more signage, radar, signs that say, you know, there's a radar speed, just tell people it's a speed trap and stop going 40. 40 is almost slow in that part of Bellevue. People are going 45 and sometimes 50. So we need to slow down the traffic on Bellevue long before we think about putting in a traffic light. And, you know, people have tried to compare this to the Glenmore traffic light. I don't know, none of you were on council at the time, but I can remember, we were members of Glenmore for a long time. It took years and years and a lot of work and studies before that traffic light was finally put in at Glenmore. And that does help slow down people on Bellevue, but then they take off again. It becomes an acceleration area once they get through that traffic light. So I think you need to give a lot of advance warning. The signs, you know, when people are westbound, as soon as they cross University, they need to see a sign immediately that says you're entering a speed zone. And it's going to be 30, 35, whatever, but they just need a lot more signage there. And the same thing on the other side. So I hope we can find a way to slow down the traffic, make it a safer area, but it's not going to be, it's a highway, it's a state highway. It's not going to be a place for pedestrian crossings or bicyclists. We have a lot of trails, a lot of other areas for people to walk and cycle. So
Thank you.
I think that takes my time up. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last of people signed up. Is there anyone else who didn't have an opportunity to sign up who wishes to speak? Then seeing none, we'll move on to our council discussion, and I'll lead us off a little bit. As I think we all saw from the results presented, the study concludes that none of the warrants for a traffic signal are met, even when applying the most generous parameters. These findings align closely with the 2008 study, which reached the same conclusion, further indicating that perhaps the 2024 data was an outlier. Additionally, the study confirms that traffic volumes on Franklin are generally very low, and that speeding on Bellevue is a separate, distinct issue that needs to be addressed. We are here tonight to look at these facts objectively. Because we are not traffic engineers, our goal this evening isn't to design a new intersection on the fly, although some alternatives have been suggested, but rather to determine our strategic next steps based on the data. And so to start that discussion, I'll share my personal thought about a future direction. Given the deeply divided feedback we have received, I realize that some people in our community will be disappointed no matter the outcome of this process. And for that, I really am truly sorry. It would make this job much easier if I could make everyone happy all of the time. But alas, I cannot. As I evaluate the data, I have to consider this intersection as one part of a broader roadway network and a larger community, the overall safety of which is incredibly important to me. Looking at the complete picture, it's clear that the data does not support installing a traffic signal. Furthermore, when it comes to alternative safety measures, Cherry Hills Village doesn't have the final say. Bellevue is a state highway and under the jurisdiction of CDOT. However, CDOT has recently indicated that they are actively reviewing the intersection. And I believe our best next step as a community is to lean into that partnership with CDOT. We need to be highly active participants in CDOT's process, ensuring that the safety and concerns and voices of our residents are directly integrated into whatever actions they choose to take next. We all have to acknowledge that this is CDOT's road, and frankly, they can do whatever they want, regardless of what anyone in Cherry Hills Village might think. And I believe that our best efforts as a city council are to make sure that our residents are represented in CDOT's process. So my recommendation would be to work with CDOT as they evaluate future next steps.
I happen to be in agreement with your conclusions, Mayor, maybe for slightly different reasons, but very much in favor of the conclusion. As you said, this process was initiated because of the interest of members of our community. And as you also noted, and as Director Goldie noted, the center of this interest were two incredibly tragic accidents that I know that our entire community, and certainly our city staff and this council, share in the sorrow and grieve the two lives that were lost at that intersection. We care, and this council cares, deeply about public safety. It is, in my opinion, certainly our number one concern, and always should be. And as you noted, and that was one of the reasons that we initiated a process that was going to go through in a thoughtful, step-by-step fashion, with each step informed by the previous step. In other words, no predetermined, because we didn't know what the results of each step would be. And it has been pointed out that whatever changes might be proposed at this intersection, or any such intersection on Bellevue, they would be dependent upon CDOT approval. So obviously we could propose a change, but CDOT would have to approve the implementation of any such change. But with this in mind, we took the first step by initiating the traffic study, and that we just went over. But since we took that step, CDOT, as you just noted, has decided to undertake an evaluation of, and I quote, all options at this intersection. And they're going to be doing that irrespective of whatever Cherry Hills or Greenwood Village might do. Although they did say that they will, and I'm quoting again, work with both agencies to ensure everyone is on the same page. I personally think that's a good thing, and I appreciate CDOT's intentions in this regard. But so given that CDOT has decided to undertake this evaluation themselves, and at the end of the day, CDOT would have to approve anything that impacts that intersection, I think the prudent next step for Cherry Hills is to ensure that we have a seat at that table and are active and engaged participants in this evaluation to ensure that the interests of our community are represented, considered, and addressed. I think to do anything beyond that at this time risks creating confusion and or slowing down the process. Therefore, I agree that our next step should be to participate fully and completely with the CDOT evaluation. And I want to emphasize, and particularly for staff, that I want to ensure that it is a full and complete participation with whatever expertise we need in order to ensure, again, that the interests of our community are considered and addressed in that evaluation that CDOT does.
Councilor McGuire?
I think this has been, unfortunately, somewhat of a polarizing situation for our community, because certainly I think we can acknowledge there are safety issues at this intersection, but at the same time, people in the neighborhoods adjacent to it worry about safety issues in their neighborhoods should a traffic light be installed and divert traffic into those neighborhoods. And both are valid concerns. I agree with the mayor and Mr. Holland that we should lean in and participate in the CDOT analysis, assuming there is one. They've indicated that there is one, but we haven't gotten much more information from that, and that concerns me. Obviously, I think we should be represented in that because we want to know what's going to happen, because that then will inform us as to what issues we need to consider resulting from that. However, I think there are things that we can undertake on our own without waiting for CDOT to begin to analyze what are the root causes of the safety issue at this intersection. Is it the speeding? Is it the left-hand turns? We need to understand those things And I would suggest not wait for CDOT to do their analysis, but we could start that. I think, Councilman Holland, there are also steps that we can take without CDOT approval. Speed enforcement is one example. Prohibiting left turns, I believe we could do without CDOT's.
I don't want to brainstorm ideas, though.
I'm
but okay.
not, I'm giving examples, is all I'm doing. But that I think there are steps that we could take after an analysis without waiting for CDOT to do something. What concerns me is that this is, there are safety concerns at this intersection, and I think we need to continue the process of analyzing that. So that is where I stand on this issue. And I did have one question for Jay, Director Goldie, that I just wanted to clear up. Someone was concerned that the analysis took place on days when school was not in session. My understanding is we had the equipment out there for several weeks.
That's correct. We had our own equipment out for 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after the actual equipment from WSB was out there.
So somebody could have seen equipment and said school's
Yes.
not in session, but you are confirming the days that were in the study, all of the schools were in
Yes,
session.
that was different equipment that was used, not the city's equipment. We collected data before and after, and we did confirm the days that are on the study are the actual days, and all schools were in session. All schools were on normal schedule.
Okay, thank you. And then do pedestrians include, are bicyclists considered pedestrians?
Yes, they're counted separately, but then we have the bike and pedestrian separately, but they're put to one when it goes on to the analysis.
And pedestrians include people who cross from, say, one side of east, let's say they're standing on the south side of Bellevue and they cross Franklin. That crossing would be.
Yes, it
counted, and
counts
crossing Bellevue.
all movements. So if they just went north or east-west on Franklin, that's still a pedestrian in the area. That doesn't say how many pedestrians went
Each way, right. you just
across.
count all of them. Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Fisher.
Thank you. I had that clarifying question about schools. I looked it up, actually. I think that the spring breaks ended on March 22nd. So thank you for clarifying that. But I also had a question for you. Thank you for helping us understand the warrant study. Lots of great information in there. We also saw an email about a meeting that CDOT is attending. Can you remind us when that is, when we think that is?
Chris has more
Yeah,
information.
Greenwood Village, I believe, this is somewhat secondhand knowledge, so I am not the correct source. I would recommend anybody who's interested in this reaching out to Greenwood Village directly, but I believe they are hosting a neighborhood meeting, maybe not a community-wide meeting, at City Hall a week from today. I don't know the time, unfortunately, but we did hear in an email that there was an expectation that CDOT would be in attendance. I know that we've had obviously a lot of opportunities for public comment here at in our city council meetings. I know for residents, Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills Village, wherever, it might be another opportunity, especially with CDOT in the room, to go participate and hear what the latest is.
Absolutely, thank you. I just wanted to add my thanks to all of the community members, really, from both cities who have made public comment and sent us emails, all of which are part of our public record, and our city clerk has kept a running tally for us, and we get frequent updates. And I do respect and appreciate all of your thoughtful and well-researched comments. And as has already been said, like all of you and all of my colleagues up here and in this room, we do continue to keep the Goldberg family and their friends in our hearts and in our minds, and it's really hard not to think of them, isn't it, when we drive by that intersection. I must admit that I too was slightly relieved when I heard that CDOT is now involved in looking at safer options for the intersection. Since CDOT has made, I don't know, thousands maybe, of these decisions using information from engineers, it kind of seems like CDOT may be able to make a decision based more on facts and less on emotions. And therefore, for the immediate future, I agree with some of the comments up here so far, at least through the upcoming meeting on June 9th. I feel that we should continue to participate with CDOT and Greenwood Village to see what, if anything, CDOT recommends. However, before learning of CDOT's recent engagement, I was kind of ready to start a conversation with my colleagues on council to talk about our next steps. I do feel strongly that we have an obligation to look at all alternatives to enhance safety at this intersection. And I don't know, I mean, I know this would be highly unusual, but is there a way to queue it up? You know, to queue up our asking staff for those next steps, so that if in a week we find out that CDOT is leaving it up to us, that we don't have, that we can move forward with that. We're all engaged, and we don't want to lose any momentum. This has, you know, this started about 6 months ago. Well, it really started longer ago, but it started in these meetings about 6 months ago. So I am committed to keeping it moving along.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
So I appreciate the opportunity to give my thoughts this evening. As some of my colleagues, because of the importance of this issue, I've taken the time to write down my remarks, so forgive me as I read these. First and foremost, I want to express my heartfelt sympathy and condolences to the Goldberg family, their friends, and all members of the community, our community, for their loss. We miss them. I also want to recognize the citizens of both Cherry Hills and Greenwood Village who have cared deeply enough about their neighborhoods and quality of life to spend countless hours advocating for a safer intersection. My purpose tonight is to urge my fellow councilors to take action to make this intersection safer. As you know, immediately after Mr. Goldberg's tragic death, the City Council directed staff to conduct a study to determine whether conditions at the intersection met the well-established warrant conditions for a traffic light. As you have heard tonight, these conditions were not met. That does not mean, however, that this matter is concluded. There are many other ways to improve the safety of this intersection. Beginning in 2020 and continuing through 2022, I served along with fellow council members, Mayor Pro Tem Holen and Councilmember Eber, on the Cherry Hills Village Master Plan Committee. Our work produced a comprehensive, citizen-driven plan developed through years of meetings, open houses, and extensive public input with nearly 5,000 contacts. The resulting document was adopted by the City Council and serves as a guiding framework for the future of our community. Let me read the 3 guiding principles on transportation from page 33 of the plan. Number 1, minimize cut-through traffic on city streets and improve resident access to arterial routes. Number 2, improve safety and reduce the speed of vehicular and bicycle traffic on streets and trails throughout the city. Number 3, reduce conflicts between various modes of travel, vehicular, bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian. I believe these principles are as important today as when they were adopted. Over the past several months, I have spoken with residents from all sides of this issue, and I know there are different perspectives. Nevertheless, there is broad agreement on one point: we can and should make this intersection safer. We now have new information and a new opportunity. Conversations with the state following the recent tragedy, the Colorado Department of Transportation has informed the city that it intends to undertake a process to evaluate potential improvements at this intersection. My strong desire is that CDOT will invite the city, and I hope they're listening to this, to engage with them along with Greenwood Village to work collaboratively to identify and implement solutions that improve safety while respecting the character and quality of life of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eber.
Thank you, Mayor. want to start, and again, like many of my colleagues, I wanted to express my condolences to the Goldberg family. From what I understand, and I did not know the Goldbergs, but they were tremendous people within our community. They were bright lights, not only within the Greenwood and Metro Denver community, but they were even bright lights and great lights within the Greenwood Village and the Jewish communities as a whole. So I express my sincere and heartfelt condolences to them, the remaining family, to their friends, to their family members otherwise, and to the community. I sit up on council, as my fellow colleagues here know, and many of you may know, I'm an environmental attorney, I'm a business person, and I'm a real estate manager and investor. What I am not is a traffic engineer and a traffic flow expert, and when I came onto council, our job was to understand what our role was as council members and the role that the city, we leave our personal experiences behind to a certain extent and rely on data, we rely on expertise of those that are empowered as the staff of Cherry Hills Village. Greenwood does the same thing with its council and its staff. We rely on those experts. In this case, it's a traffic issue. Many of you know that I had extensive comments on prior traffic matters with the city. In some of our work, I personally have come to understand that there is some non-binding, but still there is case law that indicates council as lay people cannot refute expertise without other expertise. In other words, we sit up on council as lay people, and our voices to go against expert testimony in other situations may not necessarily be persuasive, but it certainly is not also the most prudent method of proceeding through considerations. So with that said, I look at this, and we had a very unfortunate accident a few years ago, and we've had a more recent tragedy, and even made more serious or more tragic, I guess I would say, is the uncanny fact that they were husband and wife. I think the important thing is that they were two individuals, whether they were married, whether, it's not important from the analysis, but it makes it even more pulling on my heartstrings. My belief is, as we've heard, that the traffic warrant sets out there that we do not meet the requirements or the warrants for installing a light. I think the discussion has jumped, or did jump, very quickly to the concept of a light, possibly at the expense of some of the other things that might have been out there. And I want to make clear that I do not want to put forth tonight alternatives from the dais. I don't want us to get into a situation where we talk about Rob's great idea that isn't, or Dave's great thought that is, because really, again, we are lay people in this context that I don't think any of my fellow council members are traffic experts. My belief is that we will now review the traffic data that is out there, and we will determine what is an appropriate path forward. When I look at this data, and over the course of all of this, we have had a lot of public comment, and we have had a lot of anecdotal comment. This is a really bad intersection. This is not a bad intersection. I've been turning left for 40 years with no problem. I don't know which one wins the day or if all of them are in fact accurate. But what I do know is that we haven't considered, and I think that personally, this is my belief, we jumped to and we considered the light issue at the expense of a more prudent evaluation earlier on. And this was not anything other than the following the sequence of events. I mean, very early in the process, we had Mr. Goldberg come in and talk about the work for Andy's Light. And it was always Andy's Light, 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 light. And so I think that unfairly biased us towards the discussion of a light. And, you know, I don't know what we've really looked at, and it's my belief that we will now turn towards trying to come up with that. But I do want to talk about the idea that, you know, we sit as elected officials on behalf of Cherry Hills Village, and we have, you know, representative duties on behalf of our village. But as others have pointed out, we do share Bellevue with Greenwood Village as a border, and each of our citizens go in and out of our respective areas using Bellevue. It is a CDOT state highway, and CDOT is the decision maker as to what will eventually happen, if anything, on Bellevue. But when I say that we jump to the idea of the light, we've heard a lot of anecdotes. It's really difficult to turn left. It's really dangerous to turn left. It's a dangerous intersection. I want to make sure that I have data establishing that this is a dangerous intersection. The data that we got posits that it is not sufficient for a light. But I don't think it made a determination. This is dangerous and needs something. If that data and the expertise that we receive say that using our consultant or a consultant or somebody of greater expertise turns around and says, this is really not, compared to other intersections, a bad one or a dangerous one, then we take in and we act accordingly. Or they might say, it doesn't meet, it's not dangerous, but you could make it better. Okay. Or they might say, oh, it's really bad, and they might say, you need to do something. But that's our next step, that I think we jump to the idea of the warrant would tell us the answer of whether it's dangerous or not. And I don't know that it's done that. So with that, I'll say I'm very pleased to learn in an email that just came to us yesterday that, you know, Greenwood Village has scheduled this meeting for June the 9th. It appears, and this is an email that came from Ann Nelson, who is District 1 City Council member for Greenwood Village. And it was the first that I had heard about this. But, you know, I'm pleased that there seems to be other work that is going on contemporaneously by who I think is our fellow partner in making this determination over this area. To my understanding, and I'm willing to be wrong, it's my understanding that this email is somewhat indicative of where each of our communities may be in the process. Here we are at the city council level, having commissioned a traffic study in 2008, an additional traffic study now. A number of months ago, when we were talking about this as an issue, we talked about the pedestrian and bicycle community and how we might be able to lessen any negative impacts. And to my understanding, I think we came up with a potential idea of routing and extending the bike path under, and I'm not going to an alternative, but an alternative that we, in at least informal discussions, I'm told, had with Greenwood Village, who said, no, that's not something that we would consider right now. So I think the point is we've schemed it and we've thought of it and we commissioned our own most recent traffic studies, and we have not been lollygagging in looking at this issue and trying to address it. I am glad, and again, it appears to me that the Greenwood indication that this is a neighborhood meeting indicates to me that we are ahead of Greenwood Village in trying to address this matter. And it's not a race, and it's not a comparison, anything other than the fact that whether it's through the press or my own defensive feelings of this, it seems that this has become too divisive, that a lot of the public comments and discussion that has gone on of this has said, look at all these people in Greenwood that support this and how few oppose it, and it's mixed in Cherry Hills, so Greenwood supports it and Cherry Hills doesn't. And I don't think the data says that, first of all, but more importantly, we've never had, that I know of, any discussion or comment from Greenwood Village as a whole. And it is my suggestion and hope that the June 9th meeting is productive and inclusive, and to my understanding that if it is in fact going on, and if we are able to find out, we will attend this because they are our partner. And so, these comments that, for whatever reason, seem to have driven a wedge kind of between Greenwood Village, or to me it seems to perceive that it's driving a wedge between Greenwood and Cherry Hills. And to my understanding, we don't have that division. I think we both care equally about this intersection. We both care equally about the safety of our respective residents. And we each, in Greenwood Village and in Cherry Hills, have a responsibility of elected officials in our communities to articulate the interest and concerns of our community. Hopefully we can all mesh up, but where there's not that opportunity, we can discuss them and come to reasonable outcomes that we can all live with in the idea of addressing whether or not additional work needs to be done. So I join my colleagues that if the 6/19 meeting occurs and does include discussion, CHV will attend and be a part of what I hope appears to be, I won't say the first movement from Greenwood towards resolving this, because I think there have been an extensive amount of community discussions within a small group of Greenwood Village. But I think a lot of Greenwood doesn't know about this issue, whereas I think all of Cherry Hills seems to know about this issue. And so I'm ecstatic that CDOT seems to be involved, and I welcome their participation. I don't want to lose control and just say that whatever CDOT comes up with, we're going to go along with. Councilor Holen's comment was, we're going to be active, we're going to be involved, and we're going to be pushy the same way I hope every other party is, to make sure that this resolves things in a way that makes sense and is good for all of us to figure out how to do it best. So we don't have a warrant. I support the conclusions within the traffic study, and I am incredibly confident that we are now shifting towards really addressing what is the problem, if there is a problem, and what we can do about it. And none of us know that, so we're going to have to rely on experts for that. In the meantime, I will sneak in one quick alternative and tell the cops to get out there and enforce it. When I read 61 miles an hour as a high speed in the traffic study, I'm sitting there saying, we don't have to wait on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Heller.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I too want to express my condolences to the Goldberg family, friends, and neighbors, and also thank staff, USB, and all the community members from Greenwood Village and Cherry Hills Village for all of the comments. I think it is very indicative of our ability to weigh in and have different points of view and do so in this sort of civil setting, so thank you very much. Public safety has been and needs to remain the focus of this discussion. I think it has tonight. And that includes evaluating making this intersection. And frankly, I think as you several mentioned, the village safer. And so I think where I am, Mayor, is sort of in between. I think we should ride on CDOT's efforts. But Susan, I think to the extent that, that's not going to happen quickly, there is bureaucracy, that we might take on some evaluation of our own, as you suggested. I do wonder if our comprehensive, if I'm getting the name wrong, City Manager, our traffic study might look at some of the things outside of CDOT's jurisdiction that you were referring to, I think others were referring to, as a potential vehicle to look at this intersection and others. Speed is probably not an issue that's unique to this particular intersection. Rather, I think it's probably an issue throughout the village in many places. So bottom line, we should have a seat at the table in the active way that Earl described, but if it's going to take too long, I'm in favor of looking at some interim measures, maybe using existing vehicles that we already have in place.
Okay, so let me try to summarize. I think I've heard a lot of different things. I think I've heard consensus that the warrants are not met for a traffic signal, and that, at least from Cherry Hills Village's perspective, the city will not be pursuing that independently at this time. I don't think I heard anyone say anything contrary to that. Okay. I also heard general consensus on being engaged with CDOT in their efforts at making sure that the needs and requirements and desires of Cherry Hills Village residents are represented and reflected in their deliberations and their process. I heard varying levels of support for doing something else in addition to that. It's not entirely clear what that is. The one that's most recent, so it's most recent in my brain, is making sure that this intersection is part of the citywide traffic study that we have already planned on doing this year. Is that correct? Or is it, when will it actually be performed? It's being performed now.
We're working on the contract.
Okay.
You're supposed to sign the contract tonight.
Oh, okay, well, yes, so.
So working is
yeah, but
for a little bit longer.
Yes.
Yeah, this intersection was fully taken out of the scope, but we can, depending on what council decides, bring something back in to look at this.
Okay, when you say taken out of the scope, the last time we conducted, it is a citywide traffic study.
Yes, and the data we collected is typically the data we would collect for that traffic study.
Okay.
So we already have that.
We're not going to collect the same data.
We're not going to collect the same data, but we're not looking at other alternatives either at this point.
Okay, well, I think, but it's not exactly other alternatives are not explicitly called for in the scope, but is it specifically excluded? And let me just use an example. The last time we did this study, the citywide traffic study, the objective was for the engineers to identify problem areas. We didn't go into it saying, here are the problem areas, look at this, look at that. They came back to us after compiling the data and said, here, right.
Yeah,
and so,
based on the data, they said, if you're going to do further study, here's the areas you should look at.
right, here, intersections where performance levels are
Yep.
below a C or whatever it was. So will the traffic study, the citywide traffic study that we're doing, will it include it at that level where if problems appear, they will say
be at
this is a problem?
Yes, it'll be at a very high level.
Right,
And
okay.
then we can decide where we want to go further if that's what council decides to do.
Just to clarify that, it will be, I mean, if it comes back that it is in fact actually higher than other relative intersections.
Yeah.
There are a number of state highway intersections that are non-signalized throughout Cherry Hills Village, on Bellevue, University, and Hamden. They're going to look at all those, and it could be that other intersections actually show a higher priority. The study, though, will do that on its own. That's what it's written for today.
So it hasn't been excluded, it just has
Correct.
not been specifically identified?
Correct.
Okay. So I've heard, and I believe I would concur with that. I think that there's, if this rises to the top and other issues are identified. Oh, I guess one other consensus point, it feels as though there is a consensus that speeding is not surprisingly an issue on Bellevue, and that while not related to any physical changes to the intersection, perhaps increased enforcement to our commander would be called for. And then I feel like there's a spectrum of nothing else to something else.
Mayor?
Yes,
Well, go ahead. I have a proposal.
yes, please.
And I would argue that it kind of allows for a lot of what we heard tonight, depending on where you're at. We know that CDOT has reached out to us independently to say that they are going to evaluate all options, including a traffic signal. They are aware of our warrant study, and they still are indicating they will be looking at all options. We just learned that they will likely be attending the neighborhood meeting in Greenwood Village next week as well. So I think there should be an opportunity after tonight's discussion from you and the direction we receive from you to become fully engaged, and their participation next week, that opens the door for us to reach out to them directly, maybe with Greenwood Village, maybe apart, either way. I think there's an opportunity for us to fact find what CDOT's intentions are. If you had directed us to pursue our own independent action, we would not present that here to you tonight. We would come back to you with options. So I would propose that we do both of those, where we find out from CDOT what are your intentions, and if we get a sense that they're going to drag their feet and that they're not going to actually be as aggressive as what you all would expect, then there's an opportunity for us to look at options for our own actions that we would give to you. Like, for example, doing a contract amendment to add additional elements to our study, citywide study. Or if we hear from CDOT that they're on it and we're off and running, maybe that then speaks towards, council can take that into consideration, and then you guys can make a more informed decision about one or the other based on what we hear from CDOT. So
Does that, yep.
Mayor,
yes.
one thing, because I think this is important too, and maybe everybody knows this, maybe they don't. But when we have a seat at the table working with CDOT, and again, none of us are traffic engineers, et cetera. Director Goldie isn't, but he's got a lot of experience in this area. He's interfacing with them. But in fact, when you interface and do things along those lines, if you need additional expertise from your perspective to engage, you do that. You did that with the Hamden Corridor study, correct? I mean, in other words, it's not like staff is just going out there without taking additional expertise to engage with CDOT. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
I think that's an important point. Yep. We're not just saying, hey, Jay, just go make an effort and just keep us posted. That's not what we're talking about here. And
Yes, I think that's a fair point.
And we could have the opportunity to bring our consultants who specialize in this to those meetings with us, with CDOT.
I would also like to, as you talk about, we've heard asking CDOT what their intentions are, kind of what their time frame is. I want to make sure that everyone in the room, council, everyone listening, anybody listening online, understands what a reasonable time frame for an organization like CDOT is. I mean, I think I heard one person say, at least until the meeting next week. I can tell you that nothing is going to happen between now and next week. So if that is what people mean by a reasonable time frame, I don't think that desire will be met. So So what do you think a reasonable timeframe, when CDOT considers these, and perhaps even our consultant with his experience working at CDOT, if CDOT says we're going to consider alternatives, in my mind, that's got to be at least 6 months. But I'm open to.
I think you're absolutely right. And that is the whole reason why I am saying, yes, we will participate in the CDOT, and we need to participate in the CDOT process. But we need to be also examining options on our own, because I don't think we should be waiting 6 months or 12 months or whatever the time frame is. I think we need to be looking at what are the things that we can do independent of CDOT. And so, so your suggestion, City Manager, of let us come back to you with perhaps a menu of items, one of which may be, we think the CDOT process is going to be this way, and we think that's enough. But I would encourage you to include other alternatives, at least whether you recommend them or not.
Sure.
From a full-fledged root cause study, which you may say doesn't make sense to do because of CDOT, or maybe not, all the way down to speed enforcement or whatever the alternatives, not that we're going to brainstorm them tonight, of course.
But is it your expectation that even those things that we might do ourselves, if there are any things, that those would happen within 6 months as well? Because I think that's perhaps not realistic either.
It is.
By the time,
It is my expectation that we discuss whether or not it makes sense to do them. I think we need to look at what the alternatives are and say, yes, this doesn't make sense, but this does. There's no reason not to do this.
So I would posit that there would be no action we would take without getting significant public input, and that there is no potential alternative that would come to this council, and we would say, oh, yes, that makes sense, without any public input or further discussion. But
Well, how do we know that unless we discuss it?
because I think we've heard from people in the community that any significant change, whether it's physical change to the intersection or change otherwise, will have people who are interested and need to be informed and need to have their
I'm
opportunity.
not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
We may say, make something up. You call them pork chops. We may say, it really seems to make sense, pork chops. Well, we wouldn't just go out and do that. Of course not. We'd have to go through the whole process, engage the community. I mean, whatever the alternatives is. But I think there are some that make sense. Speed enforcement is an easy
Okay, well, that,
right?
I think, as I
So
said, speed enforcement is a separate but related issue, but.
My point is that we should at least look at what are the alternatives, and if staff says, we don't think it makes sense to do this now, we think it makes sense to do this, we need to have that discussion without waiting.
So I feel like that is different from what I have heard from certain ends of the table, and so I don't know that I've heard that there's consensus on that.
Can I weigh in just
Oh, yeah,
briefly?
Councilor Robinson and then Councilor Howard.
Great. So one thing I heard a couple times here, that we don't know that there's an issue here, and I want to refute that. 2 people have died at this intersection. It is a concern, and it's a safety concern. I think we have the evidence already to know that this is an issue of concern, and there's a safety issue at this intersection. Hopefully, we all are in agreement on that. We don't need more study or more work to do to tell us that there's a concern about safety at this intersection. I believe there is, and we've also heard from so many of our citizens. I think that absolutely it's wise to hear from CDOT, get as much information as they can to fully engage in that process. But we also should not just wait around for their time frame as well. I think we also need to understand what our alternative safety improvement items are, and the timing of those, and so on. So I think we can go forward kind of in a dual path.
Well, so I'm hearing that from a few people, and I'm seeing a head nod from this end of the table, but I don't know that there's necessarily.
I'm not proposing a dual path.
Right, yeah.
I'm suggesting that we hear from CDOT first. we can then have some options maybe teed up, right? But I'm still recommending that we hear what get some
That's what
more
I meant by the
concrete
June.
input
Okay.
from CDOT as opposed to the limited information that we've got so far, right?
And you mean talking to CDOT next week at this meeting? I don't think they're going to give you.
No, there would likely be a standalone meeting of some kind. I don't know how long that'll take to get, but if we don't get it after a while, that's information, right? That would be my feedback.
That is, yes, that is information. I don't understand, let me rephrase that. I believe, not I don't understand, I understand. I believe that we should be going down parallel paths. Because whatever the CDOT process is, it's going to take a long time. And it may go nowhere, it may go somewhere. But if we wait for that process to play itself out, we lose a lot of time, and there is a risk of other things happening, at safety not improving at that intersection. So it seems to me that we ought to pursue parallel paths. And it may not be as deep-rooted as I would like, a root cause study, but I think we should be looking at the alternatives, the safety alternatives that can improve what happens at that intersection. We should be looking at that now, and we shouldn't wait for CDOT to do that.
Well, again, I think, I've heard you say that. I don't know that I've heard consensus on that, though, but.
So, Chris, I guess, City Manager, a question. What's the downside to just making the amendments that you described to the comprehensive or the citywide traffic study? So that, in essence, we are working in parallel, but we're using a vehicle, first of all, we're leveraging CDOT, and we're using a vehicle that already exists. Maybe you waited a couple weeks and see if you can get your meeting, but why not just do that?
Can I answer that? Yes. I don't want to see us just start throwing out alternatives and decide on one. That's why there has to be an analysis to what alternatives are really going, and that's not a quick, and you can't just say, we want to try a pork chop. You have to have a professional do the analysis.
That's what I'm saying, Jay, in the study.
But there is a large cost to the actual analysis.
And also, remember that CDOT ultimately has to approve those anyway. So if CDOT goes down their process and says, we looked at a pork chop, we're not doing that, we looked at this, we're not doing, us making that recommendation or it doesn't help the process. And one way or another, CDOT will give us their answer or their approval when they give us their answer or approval.
No, I get that, Mayor, but I'm not saying dictate any solution. Just make sure the scope of the citywide traffic study is comprehensive enough to cover this intersection, any other intersection.
Right, and I think we heard that it will cover this intersection. It just won't, it's not going to be a full alternatives analysis for this intersection. It will look at the traffic counts and data that's been collected for this intersection, and if it identifies it as
a high risk.
Or,
that's a very
like it would
high
for any
level.
other intersection.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is that the amendment you were talking about?
Yes, if council wants to look at alternatives, then we would have to amend the contract, do a bid ad alternate where we would basically do a separate sort of thing.
As opposed to getting the readout, then deciding if we want to deep dive after the readout comes from the citywide.
Well, we would probably use the same process for either.
But hang on. Council wants to look at alternatives, okay? It's a question of how we look at them. Are we going to look at them in conjunction with CDOT, or are we going to go off on our own? If we're working with CDOT, what's the continuum? CDOT's not going to do what they say. They're not going to do anything. Okay, we'll find out that pretty quick and we'll realize where we are. To all the way over here, they cover everything we possibly could think of, and that's going to be in the analysis. To over here, somewhere in the middle, which is to go, they're going to reject analyzing certain alternatives, which is going to be information, which at that point in time, we would sit back and go, you know what, they're not going to consider that. That makes it tough because they won't approve it, but the point is we still want to consider that. At that point in time, then I'd say that's when we go and look at that alternative that CDOT won't consider. But you're doing it in conjunction with CDOT. until such a time as it doesn't make any more sense or we feel like we're getting stymied, which, by the way, I think that we all know, I mean, we're government, right? I mean, hey, from the government, I'm here to help you. I mean, the presumption here is CDOT wants to have safe roads, they're professionals, then they're going to do a professional job. That's where I start. Of course, we don't know. And we've got competent people, they're going to engage with each other. We're going to engage with whatever expertise or consultants we have and make an assessment as to whether or not it makes sense to go forward or not with them. And that are our concerns, as our community's concerns, being considered? And we're going to get that information, and then we will then make a judgment as to whether we go forward. With regard to Councilor Robinson's comment, I think I'm kind of where you were, that one comment that you made, but I just want to say, I'm not prepared to say that's an unsafe intersection. What I'm prepared to say is that it's clear that it could be, like all intersections, could be made safer, and in this particular intersection, it probably, the incidents that have occurred have suggested that that needs to take on some impetus to make it safer. But it's not a question of whether it is unsafe or not. Because I can tell you right now, and I've said this before, at any point in time, certainly speaking for this councilman, that there is a definitive thing that says this is unsafe, I don't care what my community says. I will take action if I can convince you all to do it. We will do it. But we don't know that. We have information, and we have information that says it's going to be safer, and I agree with that, and we have other intersections. Councilor Eber's raised intersections before that he thinks could be made safer. So that's where I come down.
Mayor, if I
Okay,
can.
yes.
I guess what I was trying to say in my comment earlier was we seem to be ahead of our partners. I am all for jumping on the CDOT wagon if it looks like it's going somewhere. We have a lame duck governor who has 5 months left or 6 months left in a term. I don't know what that means, but the reality is the institution goes on regardless of the individual. I don't think we really know what this data, and with due concern and noting of Councilor Robinson's comment, we just know that this is a bad intersection. I don't know if the data, I want experts to tell me that this is a bad intersection according to our statistics. Is 2 deaths a bad intersection? I don't mean to minimize the loss of even one life, but I don't know if 2 deaths is more than 5 near misses. You know, that's, I mean, I'm not trying to just quantify and be callous about this. What I'm trying to say is we have a pile of data that came in with this traffic study that we got to figure out what it means, and internally we can ask some of those questions. But committing towards any action right now until we know what CDOT might or might not do is premature. I mean, I guess we could look at, like traffic enforcement, or we could look at, our general concept of speed within the village and in that place in particular, but we've already commissioned a citywide traffic study that when we've talked about looking at particular areas before, we've said, let's wait because we're doing the overall traffic study for the city. Well, I think we got to wait for that a little bit to understand, or at least get some of the data that may be preliminary in that data, in that study. So I come down to the idea that, to me, we're at a think hard, see where CDOT's going, and then make a decision. And I'm not trying to, delay this unnecessarily. I'm saying you table the decision-making until you can make good decisions. And so I'm from the camp of, right now, we don't do anything other than if this meeting happens, if it does happen, I mean, remember, guys, I worked for the state for 25 years. A neighborhood meeting with a CDOT representative is going to have a mid to lower level CDOT person coming to the meeting. When it gets to city council, you might have a manager or somebody important. And I don't mean to, again, minimize the lesser ranking folk who come with good intentions to that meeting. But it looks to me like CDOT's kind of at the beginning of the process when we are way ahead of them. We got to let these guys catch up and tell us. And if they don't, timely tell us that they're looking at it. And to me, that timing is probably 4 months out, 6 months out. So when you ask what the reasonable time frame is, I'm thinking you're looking at 4 to 6 months and always internally considering things during that time frame. But for right now, I don't think you can or should be moving forward.
Okay, so I think, again, we have the points where we have consensus. Staff, we're good on those. I think the question of whether we do anything else in parallel seems to be not a consensus there and seems to be a bit of a spectrum. And so we don't have there's no vote on the agenda tonight. There's no,
Mayor, can I suggest something? Maybe
Yes.
no vote, but poll us. I'm okay with Chris's suggestion that we wait to see what the time frame might be from CDOT.
Okay.
I don't know if the majority is or not, but that's what you were saying, Rob. I think, Earl, that's where you are.
Okay.
And as long as that's fairly short, you know, I mean, I consider that to be like
Okay.
in the next month, we understand where CDOT is going. That's how I'm thinking about it.
Within the next month, understand what their intentions are. We're not going to know the results
Right.
for 4 to 6 months. But yeah,
Right.
I like you said, Chris, you know, this opens the door for you to call them or Director Goldie to call them. Absolutely. And if they say we're not touching, you know, if we hear something completely different from them,
Well, and
We're here
keeping in
again. We're here in
mind
2
that
weeks.
if they say we're not touching that, then we're out of luck because they have to approve anything we come up with anyway. So,
No, they
No.
don't have to approve anything.
well, 90% of it, they do.
Well, that's what we need to understand.
All that they do.
I think that's what we need to understand, is
Yeah.
what can we do on our own, and what do we need either?
No physical changes on our own.
For
To-
example,
to Bellevue, but
could
what
we
about?
No, not on our
prevent a
streets either.
left-hander? We can't prevent, okay, what we need to understand is what we can and can't do without CDOT's approval. And that,
Can you give us?
that would be,
There's going to be a lot of different variables. CDOT may say, we're not involved, but they may also say, you guys bring it to us what you want to do and we'll approve it. There's so many different variables.
True.
But they are 100% in control. But they may say, we're not involved financially, but if the cities want to do something, then we'll look at it, and if the cities pay for it, you can do it. That's going to be a hard one until you bring something forward.
But Director, is it fair to say that because it is a CDOT right-of-way, we could come up with anything that we want to come up with, and they have to say yes?
Yeah, no matter what
So
we
it's
come
not
up
that
with.
they may say, we defer to you, it's that they may say no to anything we do.
No, they may.
so we can't do a no left-hand turn without CDOT's approval?
No, they have all the access rights.
I didn't.
Anything that touches a CDOT right-of-way needs their approval. Their right-of-way probably comes 10 feet into Franklin. So they have full control of the intersection.
We obviously can do speed enforcement, right?
Yes.
There are a couple of pieces that we don't really need your we can do a site distance triangle analysis to make sure there's no vegetation that's blocking, that's impeding visibility. We frankly don't need your direction to do. We can do that on our own already. So there are those kinds of pieces that we can undertake now. What I was suggesting earlier, right now that CDOT's been involved it's really, I think it's helpful news, and I do think that that's good. We just don't have a lot of details about what that means.
Right.
And so what I'm suggesting is, let us work on what that is, not the final product, not getting to the end of a process. Just let us try and get you better information so that you can make this decision about whether or not we want to do an independent thing or not. That's all I was suggesting, is let us try and get more information from CDOT first.
Chris, that has to include at least an estimate, best estimate of their timeline.
Oh, yes,
whatever they're
agreed,
doing.
yes.
Okay.
But I want to.
One more thing, real quick,
on that, though.
just to clarify, there's been a lot of discussion. It feels like there are council members who feel that our process, if we did do some sort of independent thing, would go quicker than CDOT. I don't know that to be true.
I was going to make that point as well.
Yeah, because.
And I want to double up, though,
hold
with
on.
that comment, though, is while it's really important about CDOT involvement, I think it's equally important to know what our other partner, Greenwood Village, wants to do. Because, again, we are way in front of them, it looks like to me.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Hurlwin.
All I was going to say is, the one thing, to make it crystal clear, this is really what you're going to be doing. Quote, "We will be looking at all options at this intersection, including signals, to make this a safer intersection, and we'll work with both agencies so we are all on the same page."
That's quoting
Did you mean
CDOT.
that statement, or didn't you? I mean, isn't that really the meat in the coconut here? I mean, I
And a
think
couple
it
of
is.
clarifying questions like, what is that going to look like? What process are you going to use? All those kinds of things, yes.
What's your time frame?
But you're either looking at them all, or you're not.
But it does sound like we have, but while it's a delicate consensus, we've reached it. And I think the marching orders are clear to staff. Great. Then, before that unravels, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is reports from members of city boards and commissions, of which I don't see any present, and then the consent agenda.
And I move approval of consent agenda items 7A and 7B.
That was a second by Councilor McGuire. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business for Council Bill 5, Series 2026, amending the 2026 budget by approving a supplemental appropriation in the general fund for additional professional services funding to be used for community development planning support services. On second and final reading, Director Workman. Did you guys switch spots? You're keeping me on my toes.
I was going to
You're
say,
keeping me on my toes.
I for a split second, I was like, no, but thanks for notice. Yes, we have.
Okay.
We go wherever City Clerk Gillespie puts our name down.
Oh, it's like musical chairs.
It's all
We are
based on,
lemmings.
it's all based on who has the main presentation that night.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the conversation this evening. You are correct. The next item on your agenda is a second reading for a supplemental appropriation to the 2026 budget. This is a follow-up to the first reading of the budget amendment from your last meeting in order to appropriate funds for the Safe Built contract. As a reminder, the supplemental appropriation is in the amount of $50,000 to pay for Safe Built services. Again, they will be an extension of staff. They will primarily perform a review of building permits for compliance with planning and zoning requirements. The contract is a not-to-exceed amount, and because of the increased permit activity, there will be an increased permit revenue anticipated within the budget, and that increased permit revenue will be used to pay for and offset the supplemental appropriation for Safe Built services. With that, staff's available for any questions, and the recommended motion is on the screen in front of you.
All right, this is on second reading. Are there any further comments or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve on second and final reading Council Bill 5, Series 2026, a bill for an ordinance of the City of Cherry Hills Village, amending the 2026 budget by approving a supplemental appropriation for planning support services.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Heller?
Yes.
Counselor Eber?
Aye.
Counselor Holen?
Aye.
Counselor McGuire?
Aye.
Counselor Robinson?
Yes.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Moving on to Council Bill 6, Series 2026, amending Article 5 of Chapter 18 of the Municipal Code by adding a new Section 18-5-30, prohibiting the use of gray water and the installation of gray water treatment works on second and final reading. Director Workman.
Too quick for me, Madam Mayor. The next item on your agenda, again, is another second reading before council. This is the second and final reading, and this is also a follow-up to your previous meeting and discussion on May 19th regarding the use of gray water. Again, gray water is those waters that have been quote-unquote gently used before in sinks and things like that without soaps and things like that. There's been no change in the proposed language between first and second reading. Everything is as it was presented to you previously. There would be 3 new, pardon me, sections of code added under the heading of 18-5-30 that would prohibit the use of gray water within Cherry Hills Village, again, at this time and until such time as the technology improves and may warrant another conversation, excuse me, with council. With that, staff's available for questions, and the recommended motion is on the screen before you.
All right, that's on second reading. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, motion.
I move to approve Council Bill 6, Series 2026, a bill for an ordinance of the City Council of Cherry Hills Village amending Article 5 of Chapter 18 of the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code by adding a new section, 18-5-30, prohibiting the use of all gray water and the installation of gray water treatment works on second and final reading.
Second. All right, that's been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Heller?
Yes.
Counselor Ebert?
Aye.
Counselor Holen?
Aye.
Counselor McGuire?
Aye.
Counselor Robinson?
Yes.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Moving on to new business. We have a discussion related to the wildlife urban interface regulations, the WUI, as they call it. Director Workman.
This one won't be quite as quick, but we'll still try and be quick. As was just noted by the mayor, the next item on your agenda is related to wildfire urban interface regulations. The shorthand, kind of common reference to that is WUI. As context for council, back in 2023, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 23-166. Specifically, this bill did essentially 2 things. It created the Wildfire Resiliency Board, which is a board that is new as of this legislation, which has a variety of members on it, anything from local government authorities to insurance interests to firefighters to anybody that may have an interest in wildfires here in the state of Colorado. The legislation charges that board with doing 2 things. The first is to create a minimum set of code standards to make certain areas of the state more wildfire resistant. The second component is it mandates that that board define the urban, wildland urban interface areas here within the state of Colorado.
And is that supposed to be wild land or wildfire?
It's used
They use both?
interchangeably.
Okay.
The legislation also uses it kind of either or. I've used WUI just to avoid that type of confusion. And within the legislation as well, communities within the state are required to adopt either the board-developed set of WUI regulations or come up with their own more strict set of regulations by July 1st of this year. Notably, as within a lot of state mandates recently, there is no penalty in the legislation for communities that do not adopt either the code board standard set of regulations or their own. I also want to note that this legislation does not provide a lot of detail, which led to the introduction this legislative session of House Bill 26-1334 that was included in your packet. A lot of communities were hoping and relying on that some version of that legislation to come to fruition to create some additional clarity, not only for how the WUI map was created and determined, but also create some additional flexibility for communities to justify that they've been mischaracterized as having areas of a WUI designation. As I mentioned, that didn't come to fruition, so communities are kind of left interpreting the legislation on a case-by-case basis, and we'll go through some of those here in just a moment.
And maybe you're going to get to this in another slide, but one key piece of information here is that the map they came up with does show that Cherry Hills Village had, oh, there, you're going to, it's the next slide.
Thank you for the transition and the tee-up, Mayor.
I was just wondering if everybody's sitting here thinking, and why are we talking about this?
Quick question about the legislation.
Yes, sir.
though. Try to get the right Jeopardy form. It's a question. The purpose of this is not about the spread of fire from the wildland to any one structure. The purpose is, it's a question, the purpose is about preventing uncontrolled structure to structure or urban conflagration. Yes or no?
My understanding is that it is intended to do both. On the heels of the wildfires in California that was so devastating, as well as, and it escapes me right now, but the wildfire that was up in Lafayette, the Marshall Fire, thank you. Those had both components of kind of a wildfire slash.
Well, those are both urban conflagrations, I think.
Exactly, yes. But the legislation is very broad. The board, at least as I understand, the implementation of their code requirements is not only focused on building construction, but also vegetation around the different areas of the
I'll let you
state.
continue, but it's going to become very important because the whole focus is community risk reduction, not any one structure to avoid urban conflagration. I think that's really the purpose of this legislation. And I think it's going to be important when we only have one polygon.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you have far more experience in this area than any of us would care to have. But having been present for some of the hearings in the legislature last year, you know, a lot of our legislators don't understand these issues at a in-depth level. And so at a very basic level, I think the thinking is, if you live in a community that abuts wildland, that the building code should require a higher standard of fire resiliency, so that, you know, if a wildfire breaks out in the adjacent land, it doesn't destroy your whole community. And so I don't know that they have an understanding as detailed as yours is.
Well, you just basically said the same thing, so.
Okay. In the non-insurance risk management speak, yeah.
Notwithstanding that, am I right in looking at this map of saying that this is a set of regulations that would apply to 6 properties in the village and nobody else?
That's correct.
That's right. And we'd have to go through the whole process of creating all these codes and requirements and et cetera for these 6 properties. I don't even know, would we have to rezone them? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. That's part of the confusion.
That's part of the confusion and part of what was hoped to be clarified through the subsequent legislation this year that didn't come to fruition. So just to finish this thought, that's correct. These are the properties that would be limited to the enforcement of the code, should council decide to adopt that. I will say that it is my understanding it's the intention of the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Board to update the map every 3 years. But the map, the information on the map is 3 years old. So this map is from 2025, but the information that they used is from 2022. They'll update it again in 2028, but the map will only reflect information from 2025. So every 3 years, the map could change, right? So we could have more areas, or we could have less areas, depending on how the state decides that they want to regulate WUI.
And I think that thinking it's really, they were never contemplating places like Cherry Hills Village in these conversations. They really were focused on those bordering suburbs, right? Kind of the outermost suburbs. And as those communities continue to grow potentially into what is now undeveloped wildland, that the maps would have to be updated.
Correct.
To reflect that. I think that's really, they didn't fully think through all of the ramifications of this process.
Director Workman, I know you may be getting to this, but let me just ask you a question. I heard a rumor, and this is always dangerous, that they did a model to create the map. They used a computer model based on a variety of variables.
Correct.
But that the board did not have a chance to QA/QC the model. And it got rolled out basically as a first run, and you end up with polygons out of the blue like this, that if there was an opportunity to go and evaluate on a more specific case-by-case basis, may be realized, oh, well, this clearly is not at all what we're trying to accomplish. We can remove that. That didn't happen this particular time because there was a rush to pass it before the legislative session ended.
That's correct, and thank you for the segue.
Oh, you gotta talk about that anyway?
Exactly,
Okay,
yes.
just check.
So, it's not only for your staff, but for South Metro Fire, who I've spoken to about this issue. It's unclear exactly the criteria that were used in order to create this map. However, the board, the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Board, was under pressure via the legislation in order to get a map out, in order to identify the WUI area. So they threw whatever they threw against the wall, and in an effort to meet the deadlines, said, okay, this is it. And that's why there's the provisions that are onerous on the local jurisdictions to justify, or what they call ground truth, that it's not applicable even though it's shown on the map. That was their way around going through the QA/QC, is allowing each individual community to have this quote-unquote ground truth in order to sort of justify, if you will, that the polygon is inaccurate. I'm sorry?
So you're talking about this option 5?
It's a combination of option 3 with the 2 options there and option 5.
Okay.
And just a question, so if we were to take that approach, we gather the information, we say this is incorrect, we submit it to them, it takes some time, they determine whether it is accurate or not.
Correct, yes. And obviously, we wouldn't know how they would, if they would agree with that analysis or not until we get to that point. That's correct.
And by the way, that's the property owner who does that.
It's not the city?
No.
That's why I say it's a combination of option 3 in your packet, which those are the 2 options for local jurisdictions, right? Is to, 1, ask for them to approve the creation of our own set of standards that will generally have to be more restrictive than the state standards, or to come up with an alternative map that they would agree to, that we would then have to update every 3 years, just like the state anticipates updating their map every 3 years. Or the option 5, which is to work with property owners to ground truth the designation of that. Now, one of the parcels there, right, is Blackmar Commons, so we would have some control over that, but the other parcels.
We have an in with that property owner.
Yeah, for those of you that know those property owners there, they may or may not be willing to participate. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, so I didn't want to move on. If it looked like there might be some more questions, I didn't want to move on until there was some. But so there are 5 options that were listed in your staff report this evening. I'll briefly touch on them, which is adoption of the standard, no adoption of the standard, adoption and pursue the alternative code provisions or the local map, which is the 2 we just talked about, adoption with a resolution for non-enforcement, and then adoption and working with private property owners to quote-unquote ground truth the map. And then another option that has sort of become, that kind of came to fruition between the publication of the packet and tonight, is an option to wait and see, right? There's no penalties within the state legislation for not adopting it. Because of the vagueness, there are some communities, particularly one I know of for sure in Douglas County, that is taking a wait and see approach to see what, if anything, the state does for enforcement, and what, if anything, sort of a best practice, if you will, what some other communities are doing before the adoption, before they decide to adopt, because they have a lot of the same questions, right? Well, how was it determined, and what criteria were used, and what is the implications of adopting this? One of the things that I also want to make sure that I mention that we haven't mentioned yet is Cherry Hills Village is one of the few communities where we require fire suppression systems. We require a sprinkler system for all new homes. Most communities do not have that requirement. And from what I can gather based on my read of the code, that is not an approved application for compliance with these standards. So there may be something there as well.
And let me also add to that the bill that there are a lot of issues with, or a lot of groups that had issues with this legislation, and we're trying to get a fix this year, which would have also involved delaying the implementation date. I think another argument, and that includes like the builders, and I think another argument for a wait and see approach, which is kind of the same as number 2, but is that I think there's potential this coming year for there to be another attempt at revising this. And so rather than adopting this code for 1 year and then potentially either repealing it, or when this is not going to be an issue within that time frame, right? Because the odds of construction happening on those, one of them is a park, so the odds of any construction happening on that is 0. So I think that all points to wait and see what happens with this bill moving forward, and if there are changes made, and then address that moving forward. Obviously, the risk of wildfire is a very serious risk, and we are not immune to it like any other community. But I'm not sure that this particular requirement does anything to improve the wildfire resiliency of Cherry Hills Village. So.
Agreed. Yeah.
Are you still?
That makes
I was
sense.
just
No,
a
that's
discussion,
the
I
end of
guess
the
they're looking for
presentation.
direction. Does anybody have?
No, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
The wait and see approach is what makes sense.
I agree with the wait and see approach, but I think as part of that, we're not voting on anything tonight, but I think this falls squarely into our question that we have on a whole lot of other
Yes.
land use bills,
Very
about
much.
home rule authority. And,
This one's
you might-
arguably of statewide concern.
Well, I don't know, if you look at if you actually look at the bill and the provisions of the, setting up why it's a statewide, I would like, probably if we get to a formal discussion about whether to adopt or not adopt, or wait and see, which in essence, to me, is non-adopt in the short term, we're still, in theory, would, be on that naughty list. And as part of that, maybe our reasoning is, yet again, that it could be a violation of home rule. So I'm not asking for that now, but
I just, it is true that you could make an argument that this is a matter of statewide concern. They have options, though, and they could have made this a state effort, a state initiative, to enact regulations that apply, and they didn't. They instead chose to dump all of that enforcement, all of that onto local jurisdictions. That's a choice, even if you agree that it is a matter of statewide concern.
But this is a discussion we can have in the next
Yes,
phase.
yes.
Yeah.
Because again, I think we do care about wildfire
Yeah,
risk
I
in
would say
Cherry Hills Village.
It may not be a good look
yes,
to avoid
yes.
something in the name of home rule.
Fair enough. Okay, I think there's consensus then on wait and see.
Great.
Moving on to reports. As we all know, unfortunately, the christening of the new pond at Quincy Farm had to be delayed due to weather, but I'm very excited to get that rescheduled and share that with our community. And I'll just limit it to that, and we'll start, we'll start with Councilor McGuire. Start on the inside and go out this time.
I was hoping Director Goldie could give us an update on the Englewood Denver Water construction that's going on Clarkson that has it all blocked. Do you have anything, like, are they on schedule? They're not going to be on schedule?
No, they're
Well,
not even close to schedule. They were first supposed to do it 16 weeks, now they're saying 32. So I'll get an update from Ryan and let
Yeah.
you know. He's been working very closely with them. So
They were out there working on Saturday, so we were pleased with that, but shocked. Otherwise, no report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rob? Oh,
Other
yep.
than, thank you to Director Goldie for the whole effort on the warrant study. I appreciate it, and you did a good job tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Robinson?
I just note that the police graduation, Police
Oh,
Academy
yes.
graduation is Thursday night, right? And we had the opportunity, some of us, to attend pieces of that. It seemed like it was another fantastic program, so I appreciate police and the chief and all the work that went into that. So I intend to try to make it over to that.
Councilor Fisher?
Director Goldie, you're up tonight. I just wanted to mention that my street was probably seemed like it was one of the first ones in the most recent resurfacing, and it went really smoothly, so thank you for that. And Director Newman, thank you for the audited financial statements tonight.
Counselor Holland?
No report, but again, thanks to Director Goldie and staff for really a terrific presentation tonight on the Warren study and taking us through that. So thank you.
Counselor Eber?
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to the thank yous we've already heard, I wanted to thank Commissioner Goldie for what I have heard has been a really seamless street ceiling project throughout the village. Everybody's been very pleased that I've spoken with that it has not been disruptive, it hasn't been noisy, it hasn't caused traffic jams. It's been very, dare I say, seamless. Other than that, I want to...
You're all jinxing it, by the way, just so you know.
April 24th, I believe, and maybe I'm stealing somebody's thunder here, is Bike to Work Day. June 24th,
Okay, I was
sorry.
like,
I'm looking
thinking
way
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah.
June 24th, I'm really late. Bike to Work Day, all day. I don't know whether or not the city is planning this year to have okay, so maybe somebody else is already going to talk about it? They were at approximately a 20% increase in riders last year, and they're looking for a 30% increase on top of that. And then the thing to emphasize is that it is not necessarily in a world where so many folks are working from home. It is an effort to try and get people out of cars for the day, even if you're going to the grocery store or running an errand otherwise. Their hope is that we are able to get people to literally register even if you're riding 1 mile, because the number of participants is equally important to the calculation that goes into the amount of carbon that is foregone on that day. It is an attempt, for those who don't know, to try and demonstrate that there are bike paths and bike routes within the city and state to help people move around in a efficient and timely manner, in hopes that it leads to more people riding and using multimodal transportation, bikes in particular. They gave me a really nice, cool swag piece of a hat, which, if anybody wants it, you guys can have it. Other than that, no other report, but please participate in Bike to Work Day.
Thank you. Counselor Heller?
Thanks again on the warrant study. Very nice job. A complicated issue that was made easy to understand, I think. The Centennial Noise Roundtable is tomorrow night. Just one thing of interest, which does get to noise, but there's a little bit of a story to get there. The tower will be closed all summer and maybe longer for renovation. The FAA will be taking it over. Interestingly, the airport for large periods of time will be uncontrolled. And the theory is that many pilots won't land there when it's uncontrolled and go to other airports, which will reduce traffic and should reduce noise over the summer. So,
wow.
That's
That
the
would be
Centennial
very,
Airport.
yeah, that's actually a little bit scary, but okay. I think of an uncontrolled airport, it's,
Mayor, one thing, I just thought of another thing, which, we talked, summer's here, school's out, e-bikes,
Yes.
way more prolific. And thinking about the conversation tonight, and I don't know what we do about it, but I would hope to God that kids aren't taking, because they think they have more speed, and crossing over that Franklin-Bellevue intersection. And when we were talking about this, I'm just like, oh my God, that's like, could be it's a huge nightmare anyway, but I mean, and I don't know what we do about it, but it occurred to me when we were having this conversation.
yeah.
And you just think about that, I mean, to the extent that we think it's not a safe intersection, but I mean, now you start having kids thinking, hey, I got more speed, I can zip across that intersection. It scared the hell out of me.
Certainly crossing a state highway on
So, I
it's
mean,
always
it's,
a risk, yeah.
Right, I mean.
Okay, thank you. City Manager?
Director Goldie, or Commissioner Goldie, congratulations on the promotion.
So my wife's watching, and she asked if I was going to bike to work. We only live 25 miles from here, so that's 50 miles. It's uphill on the way home, though. Oh, to work. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Bike to work, not bike home.
I appreciate the comments on the chip seal. That did go really well this year. It's actually already done. They'll be back to do one more sweeping, and they were in and out of town. We've started the hot in place on the west side of town. It's been a slow start, but we're getting there, and so we're excited to see how that comes out. But no other report than that.
Thank you. Commander?
Unfortunately, I also will not be biking to work. As was already mentioned, yeah, it might take me a little bit. As was already mentioned, this Thursday is the Police Citizens Academy graduation. It will be held inside the Chambers Room here at 6 o'clock. So if you would like to attend, I'm sure they would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commander, I know that we had talked about increased enforcement for especially the e-dirt bikes, but I don't know if you have any additional information on that.
Yeah, so, I've talked with all of our patrol sergeants to try and gather the sentiment of how things have been going, especially with school being out the last couple of weeks. There's been a slight increase in e-bikes that we've seen out there. Not so much complaints that we're receiving from citizens, but just the bikes that we've been seeing out there. And we are obviously continuing our education actions as far as through our website and just word of mouth, talking with them. We have done some enforcement action as well, where we've issued citations, we've impounded bikes, because as you know, some of them are technically considered vehicles, so you need a driver's license, insurance, and they need to be registered. If the bike falls under that category and those things are not held by the drivers, then they're getting citations and their bikes are getting impounded. This actually happened just as early as this past weekend. So we are continuing to be out there taking enforcement action. And
What kind of reaction are you getting from the people that
So-
you're giving citations to or confiscation of the?
I mean, kids are kids. I would say the majority of the parents that we're talking with, they're very supportive, and either they don't know and they assure us that they will comply and have conversations with their kids. Some of them kind of leave it up to, well, we have no control over our kids. So those are the difficult ones, but we're doing our best to just make them aware of, number one, the dangers of them, and just that they're illegal and can't be out on the roads. We had one in particular, a juvenile that was probably one of the main culprits in this city, driving down Quincy. I don't know how many times I've heard this, doing wheelies in and out of different lanes of the road. And depending on who you talk to, may or may not have been an accident that occurred. So we're dealing with that. And then also, luckily, he's admitted to all his illegal actions. So
Quick additional enforcement question. So if they're illegally on the road, no license, is there a helmet law for youth? In other words, does no helmet have a less than age requirement? A 16 or a 17-year-old?
they do need to have a helmet as well.
So that's another violation,
Yes.
potentially. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If they're don't have a license, and then they also violated the helmet law.
Correct. Since we're on the topic, I'll bring up Franklin and Bellevue also. There's been a lot of discussions about that, obviously, this evening, and a lot of suggestions of more speed enforcement. I can assure you, and I hope that you are well aware, that we do take public safety very serious, and we have increased our enforcement actions out there. I can tell you over the last several months, we've written over 40 citations out there along that corridor between Clarkson and University. One of the challenges that we do have out there is because the roads are so narrow, there's not a whole lot of road or space on the side of the road for us to kind of get off and do our speed enforcement. What we have done, though, is kind of gone out and did some proactive community outreach and contacted neighbors, residents that live on both sides of the street, talked with them and worked and formed a partnership with them where they've allowed us to either sit in their driveway or on their property to give us better access to be out there, have a clear view so that we can do speed enforcement. So I can assure you that we are taking it serious, and we will continue to take it serious, and we will continue to to be out there, as well as taking our speed enforcement sign, like the one that's over by Glenmore. That one's permanently up there, but we have one that's on a trailer that we can take out there periodically.
And I guess I would just like to add that I would be, I know, just speaking for myself, I would certainly be open to a suggestion from the chief that we consider Avis or other technologies like that in that area. I think that would be an interesting discussion point, and I would at least be open to having that discussion if the chief felt it was warranted.
Me
No.
too.
I drive up and down that, living over on that side, I drive on Bellevue a lot. I think the speed has gone down. I don't think people are speeding as much as they used to, but
Well,
I
the
don't know
numbers,
whether
yeah,
you're seeing.
the numbers in the speed study would sort of indicate that. I was actually surprised that the speeds were not much higher. I mean, they're certainly higher than 35, but I would have thought they were like 60, and there were very few in that, and the average speeds were much more reasonable, although still speeding and still dangerous. But I would be interested in entertaining a force multiplier like a technology solution.
And that's one of the challenges on any roadway, not just that one in particular. Us, as we're driving normally, we're just kind of on autopilot, and we see cars, we're driving, we don't really think anything of it until that one goes flying past us, and we're like, oh my gosh, everybody's speeding and hauling too fast down the roadway. And so we just kind of attribute that to the majority of cars, when in reality, when you look at the broader study, you find that it's really not. But I mean, that's each person's perception based on their experience, and it's not to dispute that it's not happening, but on the bigger picture, this study definitely captured what's going on a normal basis at all times.
And to be clear, we are going to do enforcement, but I do think the commander is onto something about, well, it seems like everybody's kind of going this direction. The traffic engineer would look at this data, and I know that some of us have had this conversation. The traffic engineer would look at this data and go, oh, well, clearly the road is designed to go faster. We need to raise the posted speed limit.
Yeah, it is, and it
No,
is.
I'm not being, like, that is legit
Yes.
how they would solve this issue. And
Yes.
so, yes, because people, just to be clear, I've said this before, but speed limits do not dictate driving speed. It is ineffective. Study after study show that posted signs do very little to affect somebody's speed. What affects somebody's speed is the design of the road. So if you have over 85% of the people exceeding the speed limit by whatever it is, 10 miles an hour, an engineer would say, oh, well, clearly we need to up the posted speed.
Or redesign the road.
It's a
but-
difficult conversation to have in context for these conversations about these deaths, because it suggests that there's not a safety problem, right? And that's what makes it difficult. So I say all that, I absolutely think we have already been planning on doing more enforcement. But it is not just as simple as saying, well, more enforcement is going to equal long-term reduced speeds.
Yeah, I know, I think that's true. I mean, unless it is, the camera that's there, and you
Agreed.
get the
Understood.
ticket every single time you drive, and then eventually you.
Yes, I understand.
And it is,
That is different. I would
to
agree.
give humanity the benefit of the doubt, the speed limit gets reduced there, and I don't think people notice that. And so maybe there are some things we could do to make that more noticeable. But anyway, that's just to throw out there that, enforcement seems to be important, and if there's anything that the city council can do to help our police department be, more present in enforcement, we would be open to that discussion.
I don't have any personal experience with those types of cameras, but I will definitely have a conversation with the chief.
Just a brief comment on that. On University, during the school day, when it goes to 20 miles an hour, people slow down for that, right? Because you enforce it. And I got a ticket there myself 20 years ago, and I'm very conscious, and I think others are too. So I think enforcement does have an impact.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Director Workman.
No updates this evening.
Director Newman.
As Councilmember Fisher mentioned, you have the 2025 audit in front of you tonight. So if you could please take the time to review that, check for any edits, and let me know if you have any specific questions or items that you would like CLA, our auditors, to cover when they present next council meeting. That would be wonderful. And that's it for me. Thank you.
And thank you for working so hard on this. I know this was your first time as the lead on this audit, and so well done, and I'm hopeful it didn't shave too many years off your life. City Clerk. Communications.
Thank you. I'm just going to add, kind of circle back to the e-motos and the e-bikes, is that we've met with PD and Parks and have the foundations for a campaign. So just going to build that out now, and we should be seeing that in the next week or so.
Great, thank you. City Attorney.
No report.
And City Manager.
Yeah, I do want to give council a heads up that I will be out of town the rest of the week. And just because of schedules and the way it works out, there will not be a weekly update this week. However, I do know that there was some discussion, now I forget what it was. You were going to somebody was going to look at some follow-up information. We just said it here. Maybe it was. Yes, Clarkson. If you could just send that out to council directly as you get that, because we won't be doing a weekly update. That's where we normally do it. Finally, I'd like to just thank all of staff. This is an unusual council meeting. It's just not normal. We'll probably have another one like this at some point in the future, but they just don't happen often. And a lot of effort went in by literally everybody chipped in today.
Yes.
You know, setting up the room for all sorts of people, setting up the atrium. We had a little baptism by fire for our communications and outreach coordinator. Did a great job. You know, helped really shape a lot of the sessions that we had with all of you this week. I do think, though, special recognition does belong to Director Goldie. That was not easy, and he did a great job. He did a great job about the right level of detail, but also putting it in terms that everyone could understand. Knocked it out of the park. Well done.
All right, well, if there is nothing else, then we will stand adjourned at 9:06 p.m.